My big suggestion to students, particularly through high school, is
you can do anything.
Choose it for you, not for
It is worth
it.
Just focus on the next
Doesn't
step.
matter what you're doing.
Don't be afraid.
As long as you're doing
That
something.
is such good advice.
I don't think I could see myself doing
It's a
anything else.
challenging life.
Student nights, Wednesday to
Oh,
Saturday.
I worked on that house.
I racked up every single dollar of debt that I
I
possibly
think there's
could.
a lot of pressure on high school.
Yeah, I
kids
just
these
love
days, right?
working outside.
And if money is something that you care a lot
In
about,
hindsight, that
I've
was...
also been a very indecisive
But you
person.
keep looking for roads that have been less
It
travelled.
was just that moment that I knew what I wanted to do. So nothing else is going to change that.
Welcome to the guest speaker.
And I taught for 25 odd years. The chances of teaching a tattoo artist are probably quite slim. I say that, but maybe I don't know. But you know what I mean? And then also to sort of, I suppose, you own your own business. You're not, I mean, you work, you're not working for someone. So there's, and I was always interested more into your business mind as well. So I suppose the fascination for me and for a lot of kids, and I mentioned too, Miss McLean at a school with no careers advisor, and their role as a DP is interview each kid and say, what do you want to be? And of course, kids feel the pressure to say something, but this kid was absolutely adamant, piercing and tattoos.
I love that.
Of course, you know, she knows what I'm up to, and she said, I just can't wait for her to hear Marisca. So I think you've got this niche, obviously, but I also, you've just got no idea, I think, people, how the opportunities you had as a student in terms of you were super clever. In fact, both of you are sitting here, don't know whether you both know, both scholarship geography students, and you just didn't go where most people thought. And so I suppose, can I take you back to school before you were a tattoo artist? What are your memories of school? What are your memories of what you were good at, how you found school, first and foremost?
I think that at school I had an overall positive experience. Like I said, I think that the way that the schooling system is set up, I was able to excel in that specific setup. I think I only say that because I know that there's kids who the way that schooling is set up isn't necessarily for them, but because me being an academic, being like a more like well-behaved child, I think that it was set up for me, which I was very fortunate about. I really enjoyed subjects in the humanitarian sort of sector, more like geography, biology, like English, the creative writing and everything. I really enjoyed that, as well as art. But I think it's really difficult when it comes to academics because I really enjoyed leaning towards the academic side. I love learning. I really enjoyed that while still doing art sort of on the side, just because I also enjoyed that. But yes, I think that I don't know what other questions you're going to ask, but I wanted to get into the like volunteer and the that side maybe a little bit later, just because I think that that's more like advice that I want to give in terms of the volunteer and the awards.
So when you say the art was sort of over here, and this is my defense, I suppose, I'm trying to find those kids who mum and dad go, you know, don't take painting because you're not going to be a painter, or don't take dance because you're not going to dance.
Yeah.
Where was art? Where was that creative side at school? Did you do it as a subject, or was it more at home? Yeah, where was that part of you?
So I did art in, I think I did it throughout school, like when I was younger, and then a little bit into high school as well. I always took it as an elective. And then I did level 1 and 2 NCEA art, and then I actually dropped it in level 3 because I decided to do outdoor ed instead, which in hindsight was one of the best things I could have done, which sounds really funny because you think that, I want to pursue a career in art. But a lot of people I know who have pursued a career in art, it's not, they haven't necessarily pursued it academically. It's just because it's a passion of theirs and they've worked on the side for a long time with it, and then they've decided, this is my calling, I'm going to follow it. So you don't actually necessarily have to have a qualification in art to do art. You just have to have the persistence and the dedication, the whole practice makes progress thing. So I actually, I dropped art in level 3. I think everybody saw, they were like, oh, that's a weird thing to do. But at that point I was very environmentally focused. I think that because I had so much academic behind me, it was a really good thing to go outside more and just find inspiration through that. And yeah, that was a really important move that I think was not something people would expect, but the art side of it, I would definitely still do it in my spare time, which is why I was like, I don't need to necessarily do this at school as well.
Okay. So you're sitting there, you're a successful student, you're picking, you're choosing, you're meandering your way through there. At what point did you start to go, where am I going? Where's my, and what might I do after? Do you remember being asked as a fourth form or a year? And did you have different views before you decided your first step?
I think because I was very, how do I answer this? So I think the way that the kind of career counseling and everything and the encouragement at school when it came to deciding what career path you want to go on, the way that I took it was in the sense of, what do you enjoy? Where do you, and how can you make that into a career effectively? So that's why I never really wanted to turn art into a career, because I was very much aware of the fact that, or I think people would say that you don't really make money in art. You can't really turn that into a full-time job. And I actually was very passionate about the environment and science. So I just thought, okay, science seems like a much easier pathway to follow. So I'm going to follow that because, like I always have, I can always do art in my spare time. So with that, it was actually pretty good. I think the advice that I got, especially from like the extension classes and just having conversations with my teachers and seeing like where they were at, I think that I just decided that that would be easier and that I needed a piece of paper, which is a whole another thing that is very interesting to me, because there's the part of me that I'm so happy that I went to university and pursued the science, because that actually made me realize I think it was when I was studying in Palmerston North, where I was sitting there waiting to do or procrastinating I think it was a biology paper, and I was just drawing the whole time. And I was always like, okay, I'll leave that for last minute. I just need to finish this drawing I'm doing. And I think that was actually not till after school that I realized like I need to pursue art, because if I'm constantly doing this in my spare time, is it an option for me to move into that career? But before that, I think I just kind of fell into this is what you should do. Which again, I'm not mad about, because I think that needed to happen.
No, and I want to pick up on that societal expectation, and I'm even going to bring in parents, because in some respects I feel for your parents with you and Marnus. But on the other, they must be just in the end really stoked. But it must be hard because there will be parents watch this too who think, oh, I've got this crazy child who draws, or wants to be a musician, and I'm like a defender of it. So that expectation you felt.
I think that the thing with my support system growing up is I was very fortunate to a few times there I was reminded that it doesn't matter what you're doing as long as you're doing something. So when I started doing more art and kind of not focusing as much on uni, I actually remember my parents being like, look, you don't have to stay at uni. It's not the end of the world if you want to pursue something else. Because like I said, as long as you're doing something, it's about growth and moving forward. It does it as long as you're happy. I think I'm very fortunate that my support system always instilled that value in me.
So you initially, sorry, just quickly,
No, it's okay.
what was the first step into uni?
Yeah.
So you left school, you went to
Otago.
Okay, and to study
I think I was doing zoology.
Okay, how long did you last?
6 months, one semester.
Okay,
Yeah.
Decided what? Not for me.
Look, you know what's interesting about that is I actually really enjoyed Otago. I still stan Otago. I would go back there in a heartbeat if it wasn't in Dunedin. And even then, maybe one day I'll go back. I think it is a very good university. Having been to multiple and seeing the way it's all set out, I actually think it's great. I do think a big part of the reason that I didn't last long is because of the hall that I was in. It was very sorority, like cliquey, I think, in a very cool, and I do think certain types of people would absolutely thrive in that situation, but I'm much more of like an introvert, and I think that it was a lot of the you're still growing into yourself as effectively moving from child to adult within that weird span of nobody really knows what they're doing, whether it's socially, academically. I think there was so much happening there that I just think that became a little bit much, and I wasn't willing to sacrifice that part of my well-being for my study. I still really enjoyed it and everything, but yeah, it was a lot. So I'm very grateful for it. But I think that that's a part that people don't really talk about as much. I think they're like, oh, you're going to uni, it's very exciting. And it's like, oh, but it's actually also terrifying.
Cool. And did you know of other halls that may have been more suited? Because I think this is the thing a lot of kids don't understand. You have a lot of choices and you put option one because your brother went or your sister or someone you know, but I mean, there's drinking halls, non-drink, do you feel you had a range there or was there only one? And did you ever hear of one you thought may have been more suited? Because I think kids do need to consider that part. Because I was like you. The moving away from home, going to halls just about killed me. And I think kids need to consider that. Yeah.
So I think that I do think the hall I went to was really good in the second part of the year. I think there was just certain traditions and stuff that I was like, this is so odd to me personally, coming in as like an autonomous human being. Like, why are you making us do initiations? That's odd. So
You've got to tell us some. You've got to tell us some.
No, I can't because if I do, I'm gonna no, I can't. So I think there's a lot of halls in Dunedin, and they all have very different things. Where I think the one I went to, there was only like 100 first years. So it was really small, and it is beautiful, and it is an amazing spot. But maybe for me, something would have been more suited where it was a little bit further out of town, maybe, and it wasn't as like integrated. It was a little bit bigger, and I was able to be more, not just sort of more in a flatting situation almost, rather than everyone eats together in the dining hall. Everyone has these things that they do together sort of thing. I think that was a lot socially for me to deal with. So there's a lot of options in Dunedin. There would have definitely been a couple of places I think I might have thrived at a little bit more. So I think it's just considering not going too far out of your comfort zone when it comes to deciding on a hall, because you're already so out of your comfort zone moving from the routine of school to the university experience. So that's something that I think is definitely worth considering. And at the time, it's very exciting, but it's just kind of being aware of your limits and knowing how much you're willing to change in the space of a month.
I really like that and think I wrote it down too, because you say, I'll push yourself out of your comfort zone in this, but if you push too far, then you've got no sense of anchoring to steady yourself. So instead of maybe you'd been able to have some more autonomy or whatever it may be, but if you've lost all sense of routine, identity, when you've gone from, Cambridge down to Otago like that, I like that. It's a good call out of let's push our comfort zone, but also things don't radically change that much between when you leave school in November, December to when you're supposed to start 3 months later. Let's keep that in mind. So thank you for calling that out.
Yeah, it's okay.
So you're now 6 months in, you pull the plug. What happens next?
I think I moved back to Cambridge. So at the time, my parents and everything were in they weren't even in Cambridge anymore. I just decided that that was where some of my friends were. So I was like, I'm going to go back. I was very much aware that I'd completed a semester. If I wanted to go back and study, it's not the end of the world. But at the time, I think it just wasn't calling to me as much anymore. And I was aware of the fact that I just needed a break. So I took a break. I just went and applied for a bunch of jobs, got my full driver's license, just like flattered for a little bit. And then I think I decided to go traveling for a little bit. We went to Africa, went to a couple of the islands. And then I think I wanted to go back to study. I was like, okay, cool, I'm ready. I've done my stint. I think I took about a year and a half off. And then I went back to study, and I thought I would just go a little bit closer. So I ended up studying environmental science in Palmerston North for that. And I was there for 4 months. So that was great.
This story is like, I hear, you know, it happens all the time, but okay, 4 months. Let's move on.
I didn't finish the semester that time, but that is purely because within that time in Palmerston North, I was getting more tattoos. I can't remember what persuaded me to do it, but I was like, okay, I'll get more tattoos. I found a tattoo artist I really liked, so I would go to him to get tattoos. He was based in Auckland. And I was just like, I really enjoy the creative side of that, so I'm going to start drawing. It was very like illustrative work, and that was the point at Palmerston North where I was sitting procrastinating assignments, just drawing all the time. So I think there was a little bit of a progression there where I was like, maybe I can do this. I think I had done a couple of tattoos on my friends at that stage just because that's what kids do. And from there was one weekend where I just decided, like, look, I would always travel around with my drawings because I was going back and forth between Cambridge and Palmerston North pretty regularly. I just decided, like, hey, let's go up to Auckland and have a chat to my tattoo artist to see what the deal is with the industry. I just want to see how, if it was an option. So I think going to chat to him about it was so important. Just opening yourself up to that experience to kind of network a little bit, I would say.
This is your sliding door moment, surely.
Yeah, that I remember where I was sitting that one night when I was just drawing, and I'm like, what am I doing with my life? I think it was a very big eye-opener. And then that weekend, actually, that I went up to talk to Tree about this apprenticeship, the night before we went up, I remember that was when my parents were like, you don't have to stay at uni, it's fine. Like, just go do whatever you think makes you happy, as long as you are moving forward. It's a totally cool thing to do, because I think that tattooing does have this, or definitely used to have a bit more of a taboo around it, being like, oh, it's something that drop kicks do, you know, like it's not a feasible career. But I think having that support system behind me, and then going up to the studio that I was getting tattooed at, I really admired them, because they were sort of pushing a style and a narrative in the tattoo world that was changing the perspective of tattoos in general. It was very much like the fine line style that was a little bit more accepted by a lot more people. So I went up, had a chat to him, and I was very fortunate to be offered an apprenticeship, because I think the only reason he really offered it to me is because they already knew me. They knew they had the position available so my timing was also just very fortunate. They knew me, so because I'd been in a few times, I'd had conversations with them, I'd spoken to the artists, and he just took a chance on me, and I'm so grateful for it.
Cool. And so how do you know, we know of apprenticeships in plumbing and that, you know, like, what's an apprentice, what does it look like in tattoo? How long did you spend? How did you train? How does that look like?
Apprenticeships are very unofficial in the tattoo world. There's not, in New Zealand, there isn't necessarily a set curriculum that you do or anything like that. I actually don't know if there's a set curriculum anywhere in the world that you do. So it really depends on the studio that you go to. It's more, they say apprenticeship, but I would say it's more of a mentorship. In the sense that you do obviously learn the skills and everything, but it's a little bit self-taught as well. So it's very unofficial. So definitely if you're going to do it, make sure that you go to a studio that is reputable, that do a style that you want to learn. And it's actually very difficult to get an apprenticeship, I would say, which is why I kind of emphasized the networking thing before and how they knew me, because I think that is the biggest way that people get tattoo apprenticeships is through talking to artists and showing their dedication, drawing all the time, having a portfolio to show. But I think that, yeah, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to go to a studio that is reputable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you talk style, so there'll be a lot of people, there could be parents watching this, they won't know styles. Are you talking from someone's skull and crossbow back from the 60s that they're embarrassed about through to, I mean, I know the stuff you do. Can you explain to people styles? Like, is that something that's...
Yep, of course. Like, I think when I say styles, I mean more like photorealism in comparison to illustration. So if you think of like a textbook that has these beautiful little illustrations in it in comparison to someone who draws photorealism, I don't really know how else to describe it, like basically just transfers a photo onto a drawing. There's color styles that you can do in color. There's different, I guess it's difficult because there's so many different styles, so it really is like the vibe that you create. I don't even know how to exactly describe it. I think, yeah, it involves like color, realism, fine line. With tattooing, you get like tribal, which is, you get tamoko, you get ornamental. There's so many different, it's not really one of those things that you want to be jack of all trades. You do really want to specialize in one thing. And that's not even just applying to the tattoo world. I think anybody who is creatively minded will know that they have a preference of a way that's a preference for their style is kind of, sorry, let me articulate this. It's basically just the certain way that you prefer your art to look. There we go.
And I don't think people understand that you'll say no to work because it ain't your style. Like I've said to people see my work you did for me, and that probably, I don't know whether that was your style or not. You were just very kind, but you will actually just turn people down because you're like, nah, go to someone else. That's real.
Yeah, well, it's a specialization, really. I think that in the tattoo world, it's good to know your limits, or in general, like you're not going to go to a heart surgeon to fix a broken bone. I do say no to work just because some things I'm aware of the fact that I can't do everything. I prefer to specialize in fine line.
To jump in there, like you're saying the different specializations, I love that example of like a bone doctor versus like a cardiologist or something.
Yeah.
It's the same with sport or trades or whatever. It's the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. So it's like if someone doesn't know tattoo artistry, they'll be like, oh, well, they're a tattoo artist. And then once you discover more, you realize, oh, there's even more like sub niches.
Yeah.
Which is really exciting but cool for that person who's listening, like that student who goes, oh, well, maybe, what do I like fine line or do I like tribal or what would that be? Just to even think that there's niches within the umbrella.
Yeah, well, when I went to go get my first tattoo, I think I didn't realize that. I sort of thought that one tattoo artist could do anything. So it's good for people to realize it's difficult for me to articulate just because it's my everyday. So in order to put it into layman's terms, you're right. It's a specific niche and a specialization in the same way that you get with anything, really.
And I was
what we'll hopefully be able to do is post some of your like either your Instagram so people can see it, or through permission through you, we may be able to stick it on here. And then suddenly it'll be like, oh, I get it. Because it's definitely got a style of its own, I think. And just interesting comparison, if Manus, your brother, was a tattoo artist, there'd be evilness and it'd be sorcery and, like...
He's a wizard.
yeah. And I mean, it'd be... But then a lot of us wouldn't be getting that work, but it would be phenomenal. But, yeah.
Yeah. I think he's very fortunate that he obviously does his art in a different way. So his personal art it's a bit of an outlet, which is amazing. I do the same thing, actually. Like, I have a lot of painting and stuff that I do. So that's why I really enjoy tattooing, because that's a creative outlet that's almost training me to be able to do the painting and all those other bits and pieces. So I get to live a very creative lifestyle, which is amazing. But there's lots of different styles. I couldn't even put a list out, because it's like genres of music, that mixes together. It's there's so many possibilities. Yeah.
And with the jumping back to the apprenticeship stuff, because curious as well, putting our brain back into a high schooler, and they're thinking, okay, we love art and we love expressing ourselves, but we also love to make money, because we need to do that in life too. At what point in that apprenticeship do you go from like learning and say, I don't know anything about how that operates? Like, are you making money, or when does that happen?
So,
how does that work?
The way that I have seen it laid out is pretty much that you start off basically not charging people. It's very much up to the studio that you're with and the mentor that you're under as to when you start charging people. Also, that's based on your ability. So you kind of start out on practice skin. You do lots of drawing exercises. You continuously draw just to train yourself, really. And like I said, it's so dependent on the studio that you're working under. But when you start charging for tattoos, usually there's a commission. So in the tattoo world, it's very commission based. So you get a percentage of whatever you charge the total of the tattoo for. And then once you kind of get to the point where you are self-sufficient and you're learning and you know all the techniques, that's when your mentor will decide to like graduate you. But there's not really an official graduation unless you go through and your studio has actually set up a curriculum.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's very based on your own progress. Sorry. Yeah.
Cool. There'll be kids who don't, they'll be contemplating tattoos one day. That some of them, they might not want to be an artist, but they will. In terms of charging, like, do you have a couple of pieces you'll go, well, this little flower here would cost X and take me X amount of time, whereas something like a full arm would take, just the concept of time and cost in your world.
Yep.
For product.
So art is subjective. It really, you put the price on it that you think it's worth. There's such a variation in what people charge in the tattoo world. It depends on where you are. Generally speaking, everybody charges a minimum. That minimum can range from, depending on where you are in the world, it can range from $80 to $1,000. Depends on where you are, how you are, how experienced you are. So I can't even give an exact example of that, because a lot of it is just market value. You kind of look around and be like, oh, this is what other people are charging, so this is what the norm would be. Or if you wanted to mark yourself up, it's supply, demand, market value, which is the same with any form of art, really. Taking into consideration that art in general only is as valuable as you see it. So it's a really difficult question to answer, really, because it depends on who you are and where you are.
Some people have spent upwards of $10,000 to $20,000 to $30,000 on their tattoos, But that's not a, there are people who love that art.
Yeah. I know people who charge usually it's between 800 and 3,000 a day in New Zealand. But it can be anything. So it's a difficult thing to put parameters on.
It's fascinating too, because, and I know I'm hanging on this apprenticeship, then we'll move on too, but like that first time, because I haven't had like the pleasure of really being with you, and I know Ludlam's had the tattoo and stuff, but like the first time you tattooed someone, and for reference, I've tattooed my dad because we had a friend who's a tattoo artist, and we were 12, and like he was like, you can do it, like this is mates. And I remember, as my dad, he has to love me, doing that and being terrified because if you slip or you make a mistake, but that's, in that moment, I was like, he has to love me, it's forever. That first time you did it to someone who wasn't a friend or a family member, this was like a stranger, what were those, do you remember like those emotions and what you were feeling?
Yes. I would say that the thing is that I had a lot of really supportive friends. And I had a very supportive boyfriend who is now a supportive husband, supportive family members. So I think that the first time I tattooed someone who wasn't a friend though, I think by then I was over the emotions. I was just like, cool, we can't mess this up. I don't think it's any different tattooing a friend than it is tattooing a stranger. Because either way, you can't mess it up. And if you do, you just have to make it look like it's supposed to be that way. Which I think that's just something you learn, and it's really a mindset. It's a headspace you get into, and you just lock in.
Can I just tell you, there were kids sitting here, and it was something that shocked me a little bit. I initially thought from early tattoos, you had to supply someone with the exact replica of the picture you printed off the net, sort of thing. Whereas you can come to someone like you, and I probably didn't realize, hey, I've got an idea, and leave it with you. And I probably became a nuisance because I wasn't aware someone like you operates on a different, or just operates differently. Tell me what you think you want, and I'll either design. Would that be a fair comment?
I think that's what separates a tattooist from an artist. So anybody can be a tattooist. Anyone can pick up a machine, like the way that you said before, Grace, that you tattooed your own family member. Anyone can do that. But it's the art side that I think is so important to maintain a certain level of integrity. Everybody does it differently, but really, I very much value the art of tattooing, and being able to work with a client and give them something unique that they can carry with them is a part of the process that is very important to me and my circle and my network. So I think that is just the way that we prefer to do it, really. And it also keeps us, it provides us with the opportunity to grow a lot as artists, because we do get to work with people, and there is something a lot more special in giving you something that's unique in comparison to just something that's off the internet.
Yeah. Suppose before we get towards the end, I'm interested in business, because you could equally still be in Auckland in someone's studio, going home each day, rocking up to their business. You also ventured as a young woman into business. What are your theories of business? What's your approach? Your studio, the way you operate? Yeah, interesting.
Big question, because I think that being a business owner, it's very much not something that's for everybody. I think I decided pretty early on that I wanted to create a space that was a creative space for people to come in and grow creatively, be inspired, And because I basically saw a hole in the market, I guess, and was like, this is what I want to do. Working at the studio that I was working at, I learned a lot about business in the sense that my mentor was quite business minded. It's very easy to just sort of in any job go in and have the job. But I think that, pushing yourself to actually start a business is something you really, really need to want. It has its benefits. It has its drawbacks. For me, it's definitely more of like a lifestyle. And it's a lot of work. It's not a 9 to 5. It's a 24/7. That's why I call it a lifestyle more so than like a career choice. It's very in line with pretty much entrepreneurship. So you can take this and turn it into some of the people I know that have big companies that are now retired because they saw a thing that they wanted to do. They wanted to create something and build it to a point where they were like, okay, I'm happy with this. Let's move on. That's something you can definitely do. I think one of the biggest and most important things is just to network and find things that you can see yourself building. I decided to make my own studio for a slightly different reason that I think a lot of people start businesses. Basically, I just love doing it. I wanted to continue to be the change in the tattoo world. In the same way that I said I was inspired by the studio I started at, I wanted to continue that in a slightly different geographical location, in a slightly different way, in a more eco-friendly way. But I do think that you can apply that to any industry, really. I think you just really need to want it and work at it and persist at it and talk to people and open yourself up to opportunities.
So 2 things, cool. That's incredible. There's 2 things I know about you, and one, that environmental, people wouldn't understand in the tattoo. Easy if you're a farmer to contemplate what that might look like, tattoo world environment, but also I know in terms of your well-being, scheduling and time off, that you have to take care of yourself, and that's a business model. So those 2 things there, can you comment on those so kids get a feel of that approach as a businesswoman?
So environmental wise, I think that there's things you can do that are big impact on the environment, and there's things you can do that are small impact on the environment, but those small changes that you make are the ones that end up compounding into big changes. For example, just in the tattoo world, there's so many disposables that we use, so much plastic. So I've spent hours on hours on hours looking for biodegradable, compostable alternatives. So pretty much everything that we use, except the things that get medically incinerated, is biodegradable. So that is just a small choice that I feel like I wanted to make, because it not only sits better with me, but I think that someone needs to start it for it to become normal. And I think much more people in the tattoo world are adopting that. I'm not saying that it was because of like me and the way the studio does it, but I've recommended these eco-friendly options to people. I think that you would be silly to not do that in your day-to-day life anyway. The planet needs our help. So instead of going to study environmental science and making a massive impact, or potentially no impact, depending on what you were doing that way, I was like, I want to make small changes. So these small changes are really important to me. It's also really important, no matter what job you're in, to make those tiny little changes. Because like I said, overall, those are the things that are going to compound into big changes. In terms of taking the time off and everything, it's really interesting because you have to be able to self-manage very well. I had to burn out a couple of times before I realized how to maintain my schedule in a way that I can be aware of when burnout is happening and I can stop it before it happens. burnout is something that happens to a lot of people in a lot of different ways, but in the art world specifically, it's such a, and the freelance world as well, actually, it's a big problem because you work and you work and you work and you work all the time, and you don't give yourself the space to recuperate and operate at your optimal level effectively. With tattooing, I think that being able to have my own business allows me to create my own schedule. So I will effectively just every few months schedule a week off. And if I need it, I can take it. And if I don't, then I can just still work. I think that the thing is, like, myself and my husband were both very anti taking holidays during the holiday period, if that makes sense. So we'd rather go away in winter time with our dogs and go camping when there's not heaps of people around. So we actually tend to work over holiday periods and like public holiday weekends and stuff like that, just so that we can schedule our time off other times, because that's a type of flexibility, especially slightly older generations have sort of fallen into the, we only get X amount of time off a year and we can only take it in these times. Whereas especially with newer generations, people are finding that having a more flexible schedule is a lot better for lifestyle. And with tattooing, it's a very easy thing to move your schedule around as necessary.
So,
Wicked. Okay. I have to touch on this. I think I've already mentioned it. You seem to be an advocate and a face for tattoo in terms of this youthful enthusiasm. I mean, God help you, you still look 19. And, you know, I was about to say you're not covered in tattoos, but I know you are, but you're dressed.
Yeah, I'm wearing sleeves.
Yeah. Do you feel that you are, you know, it is an industry where, and I mentioned it in my this dark space at the back of a bloody, you know, a factory where someone goes for a secret tattoo. You're changing, and I'm hoping, and, you know, I've mentioned I'd love to be able to come into your studio, and so people actually go, oh, you know, they've never been to one, and suddenly it's like, oh, it's not what I expected. Neither are you, I wouldn't think.
I think that, yes, I would say so. I think that there's such a variety within the tattoo world, and the same with everything. Is I have just chosen to be in a slightly different space to the old traditional tattooing. There's definitely still room for it, and I think tattooing in general is such a beautiful community. Especially now with social media, it's so connected. Like, there's people all over the world. I've traveled to Hamburg and Amsterdam and tattooed in the studios there. And me specifically, when I go there, I talk to these artists and the people who work in these places, and I'm like, oh, these are my people. Like, we are very similar in the sense of, if I go to a studio that's more my vibe, then I'm like, okay, yes, I actually really enjoy being in this orbit of creative people. And I think that was another thing, actually, when I started at Seventh Day at the studio I did my apprenticeship at. As soon as I walked in, within the first couple of months, I was like, these are my people. I feel so comfortable here. My nervous system is at rest. Like, this is where I want to be. So tattooing is interesting because it can be beautiful and you can put yourself out there and meet all these people. But you can also still do like the traditional route, street shop sort of vibe. If that is where you want to go, there's definitely still space for that. There's just a much more of a connected community if you put yourself out there to embrace that lighter kind of inclusive side of it.
Grace, I know you've got a great question.
Yeah. Well, before I ask, like, we have a little sign-off situation sort of thing. I'm curious because you are so community-driven, and again, I'm not very familiar with your business model. I'm actually in I'm living in Amsterdam, so next time you're there, that would be so cool. But
yeah,
in terms of, like, you had this apprenticeship, Is that something you do or you think you would see in your future of taking someone in and doing that? Like, is that on the radar or are you already doing that?
Yeah, so I've actually had a few apprentices come through the studio, and I really enjoyed it. I think that it's such an amazing thing to be able to offer this life to someone. I think that it's a very difficult thing to actually do because you have to, like I said before, you have to really want it. And I think that the hours that you put in and the dedication you put towards it, it's not for everyone. So I obviously tried when I opened applications for my apprenticeship program. I ended up taking in 2 apprentices, and they sort of went through it together and everything. And I still feel as though I constantly have a lot to learn in terms of the art world, but the basics and everything, it's, I don't know if I would necessarily see it happening again in my near future, just because it is a lot of work, not only for the apprentice, but also for the studio, which is again why it's so difficult to find it, to find an apprenticeship, because everybody's putting a lot of work in. But yeah, I really enjoyed being a mentor and, being able to offer that to people. So that was really cool. I will probably do it again one day. But for now, I think I'm very focused on my like traditional art route. So like creating paintings and all of that sort of thing. And we have a really good team of artists at the moment at the studio. So it's just a very cool place to sort of exist at this point in time.
Love that. Nurture it too. Like you mentioned,
Yeah.
recording, like you've just bought a house and you've moved and you've got your dogs. Like there's things that when you want to give it justice, which you clearly do, when you've got that energy again for that, dive back in.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Before we ask a sign-off question, is there anything we haven't asked, knowing that there's probably a lot, but we haven't asked that you feel like, I want this on the record for someone listening?
Hang on, let me check my notes. I don't know. I think that there's, like you said, there's just so much, and I guess that depends on whether you want to go down the business route or whether you want to do the specific tattoo route. I think I've covered quite a lot in terms of the tattoo route, but with starting a business and going in that direction, I think that that's one of those things that really you just have to keep working at it. It's the same with tattooing and the arts. And the thing that I found that most of the people that are successful have done is they've just kept at it. So even if you go through times where you feel like, oh, this isn't working, I need to step back from this and do something else. I think it's called plan A thinking. If you have an idea and you want to work at it, make sure it's always your plan A. Whether that is getting into a creative field, starting a business, you always have to basically not have a plan B. You have to push at it. And I think that's the thing that's actually interesting about going to uni is people always say, oh, I need something to fall back on. But most of the people I know that are successful, they don't have anything to fall back on. So because that's kind of like not in survival mode, but they're always pushing because they're like, this is my plan A, I'm going to make this work, this cannot fail. And if you have that mindset, it's full mindset, just getting, like I said before, you just lock in, you just have to make it work. And I think there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah.
So much.
Yeah.
I think both Latham and I, even just in this endeavor we're doing, can take a lot from that, where it's like, this needs to work because we want it to work. So it needs to be plan A.
So you make it work.
Latham, is there anything for you that you want to say before we ask our sign off?
Yeah, look, I probably just want to say, I suppose what strikes me most is you seem to represent a lot of people. I know of kids who are expected to go to uni and they're not sure whether they should or they shouldn't. Then some that go to uni and feel really bad about dropping out and maybe justifying to mum and dad, but that, you've represented those kids as well. You're also representing those art kids that, don't play the guitar because it's not going to get you a job, or don't draw, and you've represented them as well. And then those people, the bold people who might go, I've got a business idea, should I, shouldn't I? I'm a young woman is another one, or here's an industry. We just had Eva Brackenrig before, going into agriculture as a woman. And so I just think there's so many times there will be, and this is why we do this, is because and I've seen this in my classroom with you, people just look, it's so many things where their eyes spark up. You're not what they expect. You're not the sort of speaker that they expect. It's wicked. And I suppose, want to thank you for being that person. And I speak very similar about your brother in a slightly different context, but not really. I think you should be proud of what you've done
Thank
and
you.
who you represent. Oh, look, it really is magnificent. It's just a pleasure to talk to you for a start. That's my only statement. I don't have another question because you've been gold.
Thank you so much. That's such a beautiful, heartfelt thing to take away. I really appreciate that. I think that I'm always so open to talk to people about my experience because I do understand that helps others. So it's really cool to be able to do things like this. And man, there's so much that I could say about my journey, just depending on what scope you look at it through. So it's really cool to be able to talk to you guys, and hopefully if anyone has any questions, just fire them my way. I'm always available.
And I do say, just before Grace asks that question, is hopefully we can jack something up so people can actually see what we're talking about. Maybe visit you one day in your studio and have a quick, maybe we can add that as well in some of your art so they really do suddenly realise.
Yeah. I think it's a cool space that I've been able to create. So definitely happy to have you in to film some of that for sure.
Love it. Final question is, you could talk to you like 16, 17, on your 12, not like a generic, anyone at that age, but if you were able to talk to you and give yourself some advice, what would you like to say?
I think about this question way too often. I think it's so difficult because I don't know if this is going to sound really interesting, but I don't know if myself at 16 would necessarily have listened to me now. But I think that I would just, and the crux of it, I would just tell me to keep going, just keep moving forward, because growth ultimately is the best thing that you can continue to move towards. And I think I probably, if I had kept doing that in the way that I did, I would end up where I need to be. Even if it wasn't where I am now, I think I would end up somewhere that, as long as I'm moving forward and continuing to prioritize my mental well-being, I think those are the two things that would get you where you need to be. And hopefully I would have listened to myself if I had said that.
Wicked. Also, it seemed to come from mum and dad too, which was cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Wicked. We'll wrap that up. I do have a question off here though for Marisca.
Yeah,
Grace, but
I'll stop.
Thank you.
Wrap it up officially, and then I'll stop recording. Thank you so much, Marisca.
That's okay. Thank you for having me.